Hey guys, MTG Moxman here. Coming up next, Phyrexia, the original horror of Magic the Gathering. And it's coming to you as a lore video tonight. Tune in. Hey guys, welcome back. MTG Moxman here. Hope you guys are having a great night. If you're new to the channel and somehow found us tonight on this awesome lore video, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and join us. It's totally awesome. Now, tonight we are talking about Phyrexia. Now, in the histories of Magic, Phyrexia goes back a very long ways. Basically from Antiquities, which is the very beginning of it, all the way through the Urza's, Mishra's Wars, all the way through the sagas, basically up to its current state, which is now New Phyrexia. Now, the history goes back a very long time in Magic. It was used as kind of like the Star Trek's version of the Borg, right? The Phyrexians want to evolve. They want to become the best species. They want to invade other planets and assimilate those species into their own collective. Just like the Borg from Star Trek. You think maybe Richard Garfield was getting an idea back then. But it is an amazing history. And the story, of course, does diverge because they have magic and other things to rely on to help themselves. And, of course, Phyrexia faced its greatest foe ever when Urza became a planeswalker and came out there marching and just, like, destroyed their world, their entire world. And he, like, attempted a few times, right? Urza didn't, like, give up. It took him 5,000 years to get the job done. But here's how we go. We're going to start with Phyrexian history. All right, guys? All right, we're going to go right now to slide number 1. Now, in case you guys didn't know, Phyrexia, of course, is an entirely artificial plane. It was created by an ancient evil planeswalker who, of course, was, like, knocked out at some point. We don't know how he died or why he died, but he is gone. Now, back then, Phyrexia was not even named Phyrexia. Dryvid found this plane and brought Yawgmoth there, thinking it was a place that they could nurture and heal the sick from the Phyrexia disease that was happening on Dominaria, which was kind of partly his fault, Yawgmoth's fault, but that's okay. It was mainly created by the Power Stones, but he kind of fostered it and nurtured it in a certain way. Okay, now it is not this massive world that most people would think of. It's not like Dominaria, which is like 2.5 times the size of Earth. It's basically the size of like Australia. Okay, it's not a huge planet. A couple times bigger than Australia, and of course it's round, it's a planet. Now, but inside what's happened is because it's an artificial plane, each of these cores has been hollowed out, and there are different species, different subsects of the planet as it goes in. Now, when Phyrexia was found by Dryvid, it already had crude forms of life on it, okay? It had, everything's basically metallic. Everything's made of metal or different forms of a material. Glycerin oil is there. And what happens is, all these crude artifacts, they're like these serpent artifacts that kind of coil around trees they talk about. There's also crude walking artifacts that were obviously created by the planeswalker who was originally part of that plane. Now, when Dryvid found it, it was shortly after the death of its creator. So he already knew that this plane will cease to exist without a planeswalker's power, back then pre-mending, to assist with that power level. Now, for those of you who don't know what pre-mending is, planeswalkers back in the day were way more powerful than they are today. Okay, they decided not to die. They didn't die. They were extremely hard to kill. They didn't just like die on a whim. Massive things had to happen to cause a planeswalker to die, especially ones that have been around a long time and learned to use their powers. The most powerful planeswalker we know today is basically Nicobolus, and in pre-mending times, he was even tougher. Okay, he was basically like the epitome of all gods. Like, he was crazy. So in this case, though, Dryvid, a planeswalker, found it and figured it'd be a great place to bring Yawgmoth and bring the people who were sick with Phyrexia. Now, being an artificial plane, this plane can't exist, as you know. It has a shortened lifespan. Instead of billions of years, it might be thousands of years. It might be 10 years without someone to anchor it. So Dryvid brought Yawgmoth there. Yawgmoth found a way to tie himself to that plane, basically becoming a god of that world. They're not really telling us how it happened, but that's what happened. Now, Phyrexia up to this point was very similar to how Mirrodin was before it was invaded by the Phyrexian glycerin oil, right? So before that point, it was just a basic round world, crude life forms. Even though the creator was evil, I don't think the planet itself was very evil from what they've described it to us. But over time, Yawgmoth gave this world purpose. When he bought the people from Thran Empire who were infected with the Phyrexia, he started experimenting on them. He augmented them with metal and creations, and before you knew it, those people became the first true Phyrexians, right? Not the crude life forms. Those got evolved too, but I'm talking about the people there were the first true So don't forget, Phyrexians don't die naturally. They're mostly magical components. They've been augmented, right? So they don't just die of a natural cause. They don't die of old age. They can live for thousands of years, which is what happened to Gix and some of the other guys from our other lore videos with Urza. So what Yawgmoth did over these years is he gave the Phyrexians purpose. He gave them drive to evolve, to change, to become one with metal. That flesh was a weak casing that stopped you from becoming the true being you are. Very weird. Alright, but of course it led to the Phyrexians invading other worlds and starting machine cults, right? A cult that worshipped being a machine. And people would like embed razor blades and blades into their skin and put pieces of spikes in to show that they worship the machine. Ouch. Okay? Pretty crazy. Now, Phyrexians at this point on Phyrexia, they're left out there to rot, guys. They have to either live or die, and if they live, they get completed. They get evolved to the next level. And the more you did this, the more evolved you became, the more monstrous, the more unhuman-like you were. Now, because of their shortened lifespan, what we found was they had to prepare to leave this world. Yawgmoth knew it would happen sooner or later. They would give us a timeline, but of course he couldn't leave the planet at the time because the only way out was through the caves of Krolos, which had been closed when Glacian had basically made the Meek Power Stone, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, put them there together, and his wife Rebek had basically closed everything off. But it was found by Urza and Mishra. They fought over the stones, separated, opening the portal. At this point, as soon as Yawgmoth sensed the portal was open, he prepared for an invasion. Okay? He sent a small little bits of people there, Gix and a few others, and they started making their cults. They started making up their presence on Dominaria in very minor ways, so people wouldn't be so freaked out and try to fight against him. Now, most of the Phyrexians who are alive at this point on Phyrexia do want revenge. They knew that they were tossed out during this Thran war, and they either had to watch their city die, basically because of all kinds of war that was going on between Urza and them, or escape through the portal and become the Phyrexians we know today, which is kind of crazy, right? So most of them want to take revenge on Dominaria. That's the place they want to take over the most. And it's the place they've been locked out of for like basically ever. So the leftover Phyrexians, as we said, they're original members of the Thran Empire that was left over of the city Halcyon, right? Before it got blown up. So when Halcyon was gone, it was die there or go through the portal. They went through the portal, they became the first Phyrexians. Kind of crazy. Now, Phyrexia itself, this is a bigger shot so you guys can take a really good look at all this. Phyrexia itself is made up of multiple levels kind of spiraling into the center of the planet. Now that first sphere is called the Parity of Life. It's basically where they put people who look like humans to like live or die. Anyone who lives and conquers other people and fights the air creatures that are up there, they get completed and moved on to the next level. Okay? Now the second sphere is kind of like an ammunition for war. All they do is put all their weapons and equipment there. I'm talking enough to fill huge cities. There's smokestacks coming up from the inner core parts, and leftover bits from the first sphere kind of fall through to the second sphere. Now the third sphere is just filled with pipes, all heading up to the second and first sphere. The fourth sphere is where most of the population of Phyrexia lived. You notice I said lived. Now, this place had huge cities. Okay, and this is where most population would relegate themselves to. Now, the fifth sphere was called the Boiling Sea. And that's where the Phyrexian priests would make the newts. Basically, people like us, boiled in like this glistening oil, is how they were raised us, right? And then throw us out, of course, in the upper spheres. The sixth sphere is basically the Phyrexian government. This is where they located all the priests, the demons, the higher-ups, the praetors, who commanded the armies, which at this point are waiting to take over Dominaria. Now, the seventh sphere, there's nothing there but an eternal furnace to power the planet. The eighth sphere is the pure energy. Nothing is known about this sphere to this point, and there's not much left of it now. And the ninth sphere, the most inner tiny piece of the sphere, that's Yawgmoth's realm. That's where he is tied to the planet, and that's why he never left. As long as he stayed there, I believe the planet stayed alive. Now, when you look at that as all those multi-levels, the planet's actually much bigger than you think, because each sphere is its own entire encompassing zone. So although the planet itself wasn't big, making multiple levels coring in would be massive. But of course, they did have to portal off these planar portals to all kinds of other worlds to steal resources to keep that planet functioning and to keep their population growing. Now, Phyrexian life forms, as we said, when they first came to that planet, you had like these kind of like snake things and kind of like crude walking artifact creatures. But it doesn't have like the typical life forms of like elves and gnomes and dwarves, because it was an artificial plane when it was created, and those people were not imported to the planet. So what they ended up doing is the evolution of what Yawgmoth did created different forms of life forms on the planet. Newts are kind of like people like us, okay? But we're kind of like full of oil and stuff, and we're born there, and you know, we're not like people. Now, sleeper agents are Phyrexians who are not completed, sent to other worlds to spy, and you don't even have to know you're a Phyrexian agent, because they can use your eyes and see through you through planar portals, so they know what's going on around you and know everything you're saying. Kind of creepy, right? All right, they have gremlins, which basically are like gremlins you know from like the movies. They like take apart things and terrorize impure Phyrexians. So if you have failed Phyrexian, like if you're a nude who can't make it, it's because gremlins tore you apart. Now, they do have lesser minions and undead. Those are basically like undead taken, like people were killed, taken from that planet, brought here, and then animated through necrotic magic. Okay? So when they bring in the necromancy priests and stuff, animate the dead, now you've got zombie armies. They may still be augmented, their flesh could be peeled off, left pure skeletal, they may have other weapons and stuff added to them, but they're undead. Now, carriers, which are like these like demon things, they carry plague diseases to other worlds to wipe them out. Crazy, right? Now, mechanical constructs. Okay, these are machines that are massive, like Phyrexian dreadnoughts. They are semi-intelligent. Okay, and they are huge. And not all of these things, all these horrors and constructs, don't all work for Yawgmoth. He may have created them and released them on the planet to test the populace, but they're not with the... They're not the same goals as the Phyrexians are. Okay, they don't want to just jump off world and go take over another planet. That's not what they're there for. They're there to test the newts. Now, demons slowly became part of Phyrexia from other worlds, and they're called the Yawgmoth demons, negotiators, negators. They all come over from these worlds, what's it called, witch somethings, right? And they all come over, and they basically start worshiping Yawgmoth and believe in him. Okay? Then there's like knights. Now, the knights are kind of like your praetors and stuff. They have human-level thinking. They are free-willing, except for they can't go against Yawgmoth's will. But they can decide things, where many of the other populace are total unthinking armies of just doing whatever they're told to do. They'll march right in and get killed if they have to. Kind of creepy, right? I mean, this really does remind me in some ways of like Star Trek's Borg. It's kind of creepy to think that a populace would be this way, and that everyone could be so self-centered. Like, does it make you think of like Nazi Germany and stuff? Back in the 30s? Like, this stuff is like really creepy if you really delve into it and see what it's all about. You can see why Dominaria and all the other realms like feared this place. You can see why Urza brought the 9 Titans there and like soul bombed it to nothingness. Like right now, at this point in history, in Dominaria's history, we know that Phyrexia is just a smoking hull. There's nothing left in that world. We don't know if anyone's alive on the world, but there's no armies, there's nothing really left. There might be villages of leftover mechanical things that are living there that don't need food, water, because they're not really alive, but there's nothing else there. The place is like destroyed. Now, I'm going to show you some cards here. Now, if you look at this first one here, this is Phyrexian Unlife. Now, forget the actual mechanics of the card. That's not what I want to talk about. Look at the card picture itself. Look at that like mannequin mask with the glistening oil covering the whole body, and the oil is seeping out. You can see human eyes, but everything else looks like mechanical disgustingness. Think about what would have happened to that person to make that happen. Now, life's finale. Look at that flavor text. The feeble resistance of the flesh is over. Phyrexia spreads its shadow over all. So you can see there's actually people being impaled as new Phyrexia is being built. So it's basically the core of Phyrexia got moved to new Phyrexia through the glistening oil. Guys, that is just creepy. Even my backdrop photo. This is new Phyrexia because there's not that many images of the original Phyrexia, okay? And it's kind of old drawings from the 90s. Now, there we go. Is that one? All right, next one up. More Phyrexia card. Okay, Shattered Angel. Again, I don't care about the card. I mean, she's very creepy to look at, don't get me wrong. But look what she says. She preaches the blessings of the machine orthodoxy. So basically like a machine church. Look at her wings. They're like just flayed pieces of skin. She has no eyes. Her mouth opens like 5 times bigger than it should. It's right out of like a Benicio del Toro movie, man. It's like crazy, man. Benicio knows what he's talking about, but this is like creepy stuff. And these are the kind of angels that made Urza go ahead and kill Tazir during the war. He was convinced to kill because of what these things preached to him. So imagine what they're thinking. Over there, you'll see the forced worship. Now look at that, again, the flavor text. Imprisonment teaches revenge. Hobbling teaches resignation. So you can see, teaching revenge was making the Phyrexians want to go against Dominaria. But the resignation is when you capture people and you make them not be able to move or do anything, and they keep hearing you preach it over and over and over, you get brainwashed. Freaky stuff. Like, crazy. Now, this one here is the Torpor Orb. Now it says, Phyrexia is certainly dangerous, but I have to admire its innovations. And that's what I find funny. This is Tezzeret saying that. He's not an old planeswalker. But obviously he's been to Phyrexia, so there must be something there that caught his eye. That's great for a possible later story, right? Unless they're talking about new Phyrexia. Who knows? Now, the second part here, Inquisitor's Enrock, says, Skin is the prison of the blessed, and the stronghold of the heretic. So you can see, it's like, they peel off your flesh, take it off of you, add machine parts, and that's considered, like, good for you. Imagine doing that to a populace, where the more horrible you are, the better it is. It also reminds me of this thing, Wraith the Oblivion. It makes me remember Shades and stuff like that. The more horrific you are, the more powerful you are, the more dangerous you are out there. Like Gix was like, originally from Dominaria, he was like some rebel leader guy who got totally converted by Yawgmoth into like one of his most trusted people, who Urza finally kills by sacrificing some of his friends. Like, it's crazy. So, from what we know, there's nothing left of Phyrexia now. It's a shattered plane with nothing really holding it together. There's remnants of whatever's left after the soul bombs knocked it out. But it's funny, is Wizards hasn't gone back there. Other than that little Tezzeret quote, we don't actually know what's happening on Phyrexia at this point. We know of new Phyrexia, but we don't know what's happened on the original world. So I'd be curious to see, at least I couldn't find anything cognizant to say there was anything cool going on. But if we could go there and check it out, if Wizards would go back there with a set, Phyrexia Reborn or something, right? Or the Rise of Phyrexia, with new Phyrexia helping or something, that'd be a really cool set. I think that'd be good because the scare of what they could bring. Now, Yawgmoth is supposedly dead. I think that's better if he stays dead right now, but you could bring in other characters to take over that world and make bigger and newer threats that would threaten the multiverse, because Planeswalkers aren't as tough as they used to be. They'll need people like the Gatewatch to help out, right? It'd be very cool. So, thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope you enjoyed visiting Phyrexia with me. Thanks a lot, and please leave comments below. I'd love to know what you thought about my video. Alright, this is MTG Moxman. You guys have a great night tonight. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Thanks again for tuning in. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This was MTG Moxman, and this video is brought to you by my patrons who make this stuff possible. Thank you so much. If you want to find me on Patreon, please look me up, MTG Moxman, on Patreon. Thanks again for tuning in.